And we're live.
Okay, good. So uh, I'm going to want to focus on missing middle at this point. It's not in our bill yet, but we're interested in the program. We've heard a little bit about it. And we have the commissioner here who can give us an overview of it. And we also have the VHFA through Seth Leonard who can also talk about it. We can do that first. What I wanted from Jen Holler, given VHCB's involvement in a lot of this stuff, both from environmental and a housing perspective, uh, for Jen to sort of walk us through VHCB's comments on the bill, including missing middle. But she'll do follow up, I guess, because she's not available until 11. So let's get started. I think it probably would make sense for Josh. I know you've done this before, but give us your your picture on missing middle, the need for it, and the approach you're taking. I know one issue that I've expressed publicly earlier on that you probably didn't hear is I'm sensing some tension on how to, if we do this program, how to approach the perpetual affordability uh, aspect of it. So with that introduction, I don't see you, but I assume you're out there, Josh.
Yes. Good
Commissioner.
Josh
morning.
is there and Seth is there.
Yeah, I see Seth. Okay, welcome.
Good morning. For the record, Josh Hanford, Commissioner of Housing and Community Development. And then, I want to save a lot of time for Seth because he does have a presentation that gets into the details. And really, this program, that mechanics of it, have been designed largely by VHFA and partners in looking at this issue nationally. The governor's goal here was to get more, to make more homes available to middle income families that are struggling to find them in Vermont, both through new construction and purchase rehab of existing properties that need a lot of TLC, and but there are deals out there, and the structure and the mechanics to get it done weren't so much the governor or myself isn't sort of dictating how that should be done. We had a 2-sentence proposal to say we need money to allocate this. It needs to meet the goals in the marketplace to leverage other funds, loans. It needs to have caps on the total cost so that we're building homes that are affordable for folks in this middle income range. These homes need to be modest. They need to be in, good locations, smart growth areas. They need to be welcomed by municipalities. And there needs to be, all those values needs to be associated with it. And so, VHFA, long before this proposal was launched, was looking into this issue. They've seen a decline in loans for purchase because there's less homes available for people to buy. The down payment assistance program we already have is being underutilized because there isn't enough homes in the price range to be eligible. And we hear daily from Vermonters that are actually upset with the state that there is no homes in their price range to purchase, yet they have good careers, good jobs. They want to, have a home and put down roots in Vermont and feel like we're not meeting them where they are. They're doing all the right things and their opportunity is slipping through the cracks, and they're not sure if this is going to be successful for them in the long run. And so really our proposal is as simple as we need to change this dynamic. We need to do something because these homes are not being built naturally at this price range because they literally can't be. The developers that build them would be building at a loss, and that's just not going to happen. I think you've heard from, Michael Monty about shared equity. I think there's other nonprofits that build shared equity homes across the state that you might want to hear their perspective as well. And those homes are built, they're out there, but there is those subsidies into those projects are $250, sometimes $300,000 per home. to build at the scale we need, it's got to be more than just the shared equity model. I think what has been developed here, and Seth has slides that show this, is this subsidy could add to the shared equity homes that are already planned for and work right alongside with others to further those goals and to do more shared equity homes. But that production in and of itself, and that model by itself, is not, in our view, going to solve the problem. It's just not enough homes brought online, and the subsidy per home is very deep, and it's not quite the right answer in all parts of Vermont. And so this proposal allows for shared equity homes to benefit from this, but it also allows for a much shallower subsidy and creation of homes for folks in the middle class that will only receive a small benefit that they're able to walk away with. And in fact, that initial support subsidy for them stays with the home. It doesn't transfer in the same way that a shared equity home does forever, but it's still a benefit for the next buyer to have a home that has a $50,000, $60,000 reduction in price. And the value gap of the appraised value, I think has been often misunderstood in this discussion, that when folks build a home, they're getting an appraised value to get the construction loan. You know, across development in Vermont, for a long time, there's always been this value gap. Whether it's a downtown building, whether it's single family homes, the banks are going to have a construction appraisal. And we have seen for a long time that what they appraise it is below the cost to construct. It's true, the day that that home is sold, it's going to sell for well above that appraised value. But that doesn't matter for the people that are borrowing the money to build it. They're constrained by what the banks and lenders are putting as a value to build the home. And so therefore, you're not going to get people to build homes that cost $400,000 to build that the bank is only lending at $350,000. There's a gap that must be bridged there in order for construction to start. Then after that gap, just to construct it, just so that the developers, the builders are breaking even, if we want to then bring down that value of that home to $300,000 to make it affordable for a family that's 100% of area median income per se, we need an additional subsidy of $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, depending on what income we're targeting. And that is something that stays with the home. So this is a two-part program that is following a national proposal in the Build Back Better plan that hopeful a national tax credit will come to be that can really bring this to scale. But if Vermont can get ahead and pilot this and start it, and we have a system in place so that we can take advantage of the federal funds in an ongoing way, we will be better off. And I think that, Vermonters are demanding us to do something here. And so, I'm happy to answer, any questions, but I really think that, Seth, again, has slides at showing how this model works. It supports shared equity. It also goes beyond shared equity in ways that it can address the needs that are out there. I'm not hearing of anyone else proposing another way to address this, that, that other ideas are not being considered, or that we're being rigid in our approach and views on this. I think it's quite to the contrary. We've proposed a concept that we've heard loud and clear, but it must work in the marketplace. It must work for the folks that need these homes, and it must work for both the nonprofit builders, sector owners, and the private. And I think that's what we've presented. And so, happy to step back and answer any questions you have. And if not, turn it over to Seth.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I have a couple of questions. The proposal for $5 million in FY22 and $10 million in FY23, those would be all ARPA funds, and is envisioned without any federal legislation coming through. That's the end of the program after the $15 million is spent?
So you're correct. We have proposed ARPA since the beginning, and we proposed the small 5 million in the BAA this year to get the program underway, signal to some of the developers and builders that have already reached out to VHFA and said, "Hey, we're planning on construction starts this spring. Do you want some of these homes to be available for people, at 100% area median income, a $300,000 home? Because we would like to participate." Otherwise, they're going to build $500,000 homes and they're going to sell like that. And so beyond this sort of ARPA period, we have 3 years. We're hopeful that the federal program comes into place. We're also hopeful that, next year's budget discussions, if this pilot is proven to be successful, we find efficiencies, we find other ways to do this, work with the legislature. Maybe we have an ongoing small amount of general fund that fits this model well. I think we're open to all those considerations, but it was really a matter of we have the funding now with ARPA, we have this great need, and we have a chance to start something and learn before ongoing federal funds become available to do this, or we hope become available to do this.
Okay. And so what happens to the revolving loan fund and the $1 million that was appropriated? It's because you mentioned that this program could be for substantial renovation as well. So
Right.
aren't they like parallel programs that do similar things? And are we abandoning one in favor of another? Or are you planning on going forward with, well, you can't go forward unless we, in my opinion, until we authorize the structure to that program. But what's your,
Which is in 210.
Right. Yes. So the 1 million for that program, it's been contemplated for a couple of years, and it's general fund. And you're right. We have a hard time launching that without policy language to back it up. I think that there's some overlapping goals, but frankly, that program also has some other goals to sort of work with career technical centers and get folks job training on rehabbing these homes. With $1 million each year, it's only a few homes, and they're very targeted, using it as a job skills trades program, marketing and outreach directly to folks that are in, people of color and BIPOC that have not had the same access to homeownership is built into that program. So I don't think it's duplicative, nor will running both with some of the overlapping really address our housing shortage in this area. We have so much more we need to do to bring homes, make homes available for folks in this lower middle class income bracket. There are some discussions about this common goal of workforce development, more training in the trades through the career technical centers, and this idea that we need housing stock, and that how can we purchase, rehab, resell, build new with this workforce goal in mind. That are other discussions are happening, I know, in the House about that with some of the education committees, that they see this as a shared goal. And so depending on how all that shakes out and how the policy around this million moves forward, that could be an ongoing source to continue those efforts, if that's what folks want it to be. I think on S210, this missing middle housing component being launched quickly and being included in that could be a way to see that supported and launched quickly. I think that is been communicated, that our hope would be, since that bill is moving much faster, that this missing middle component would be included in that, and would be enough of what the governor sees as top priority housing issues to gain his overall support, as I think where we stand. And there's a lot of great things in this omnibus housing bill, but there's a lot of discussions that need to continue and happen. And what ends up where it ends up moving sort of, I think, puts some other important issues for the legislature and the governor both at risk, with having this missing middle stay in the omnibus bill. I don't know if that answers your question. I kind of went a little beyond it, but
yeah, a little bit,
I think it
a
makes
little
it clear.
beyond it. And And I understand the message you're conveying, but I did want to understand, at least as the revolving loan fund, if the enabling legislation passes wherever that happens, the $1 million is still there from FY22, and you would just use it for that purpose in FY23, I assume. Is that correct?
That would be my preference. Absolutely. You know, we have to, at the end of the fiscal year, request carry forward of general funds to support, moving that money, transferring it. And, that would be my request, is to carry it forward to launch that program. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Okay.
you had said that before. I mean, may I just ask,
Yeah,
while
go ahead.
we're being fairly blunt about all of our objectives, would the governor and the administration support if we can figure out a perpetual affordability aspect to the missing middle piece? Would that be a barrier to further administration support?
I guess I'm confused. There already is an underlaid perpetual affordability
Forever, as I recall.
No, to the extent that a good portion of these funds are going to support shared equity homes, it's there. I think if you put a requirement that every home that benefited from this has to follow a model, one, it would be very complicated to operationalize that with the types of subsidies we're talking about. And it would require the funds only go to the nonprofit ownership. And I think that would be a barrier. I think that it's naturally going to happen. The organizations like CHT are best equipped to do this program. They're already doing it, and this will be yet another source to ensure more shared equity homes come online, because right now they're only relying on the state homeownership tax credit to do that, which has a limited source. And so I think that it's baked into this program as it is, and adding it as an outright overlay for all funds would be problematic and would be counterproductive to sort of the goals and the opportunities that are already in play.
I think that's a fair question and a fair response. I think we just have to continue to peel back the onion. I think on this committee, we probably want to get the most bang for our bucks here with the ARPA funds in terms of future perpetual affordability. But if it won't work for practical reasons for what the goal is, then we may have to move away from that purist position. That's what part of the reason we're having this conversation this morning, where Seth can talk to us. I had a fairly good conversation with Maura last night about this, and it's not. I don't think it's cut and dry, especially to lay people who are not in the housing world right now. So we're trying to peel back the onion and understand that. Senator
exactly. Senator, I would just add, it's not either or, it's both. And that's how it's designed now, to work for both. And so I don't think we want to choose only one way to support the middle income housing gap that we have. I don't think that's going to be successful. I think we've designed something that is both. Both can participate. And I think that's why you've seen, VHCB, who has a foundational, support for perpetual affordability, already support this program as it exists with a $2 million grant, because we know it can work for both models. And so, I would definitely hope that we can further this discussion and make sure we can, understand the choices here.
Right. Okay. Well, Seth, we're looking forward to hearing from Seth.
Okay.
Good. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. You, Commissioner. Let's move on to Seth. I think, why don't you, Seth, start from square one, explain how you see the program working, and then we'll morph into, what the differences are between the discount. I understand there's really not any kind of concern vis-a-vis the value gap, but for the additional subsidy, whether that can be grow with the home ownership of the first owner, or We have to limit that, I guess practically, because either they won't get built or because people won't buy it if there's such a deep shared equity in this market, this tier of income, as I understand it. I don't see, Seth, are you with us?
I am.
Oh,
Yes.
hi.
Hello.
Seth, you're a shadow of your former self. I love it.
Oh, appreciate that. Thanks. in more ways than just visually, I guess.
Right.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe more to follow, not online.
Yeah, okay. You have to know Seth from way back.
Well, we're happy to see Seth as he is now, ready to rock and roll.
You all appreciate it. If it's okay, I'll put some items up on the screen if that's all right. And there is.
Are they, did you send them to Scott to post?
Yes.
So we can.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
And I'm just gonna put, let's see. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
All right. Great. And I'm just gonna make a quick adjustment here. Perfect. And I'm going to go back here actually. So for the record, my name's Seth Leonard. I'm the Managing Director of Community Development at Vermont Housing Finance Agency. Prior to this position, my background was some various roles in the municipal world. So I'm a municipal geek and I've appreciated all the planning conversations you all have been having. That's been exciting. And also previously the Housing Program Director at USDA Rural Development with a focus on development in rural communities across Vermont. So I wanted to start today with a little bit of background, but I won't spend a lot of time there. I know you have specific questions and a sharp timeline, but I wanted to point out and just keep pivoting back to these resources because I think this body of research and work that we've done in these various reports really underlines a lot of what we're supporting and comments I'll make today and the way we've tried to design things in our program proposals and beyond. So you've got the Vermont Housing Needs Assessments that tells you that prior to this pandemic, we knew that we needed to build 5,800 primary residences for Vermonters just to keep up with demand, right, and keep affordability levels where they are. You've got the analysis of Vermont affordable rental development cost factors, which was telling you that prior to the pandemic, labor and material prices were already going through the roof. And we were already lacking of economy of scale in our developments on the multifamily side, especially where when you get to 40 units, it makes a big difference as to how costs go. And the impact of zoning and regulatory environment on the way development's done in Vermont. And then we have the state of, affordable barriers, affordable housing barriers and incentives to Vermont towns, where we surveyed and heard from 69 towns across Vermont, learning interesting facts such as 22 of the 69 towns don't have zoning less than a half acre, right? Issues you're trying to work on and address through your regulatory side of what you're considering in the omnibus bill too. And then most recently, we have the state of residential development in Vermont, which is just really highlights the unprecedented challenges that developers are facing right now in this environment. And it's a perfect storm of past issues around regulatory and permitting barriers and complications that developers have been feeling compacted by a massive increase in volatility in the pricing markets, especially for labor and materials. So I can't start without doing that. And I call this the dream cycle. And it helps to understand how builders and developers will build pipelines, right? It tells you how large builders will dream, right, in terms of what they can accomplish for Vermont. Senator Sorokin, you asked that question, I think last week in testimony, with all the money going towards housing, can it all actually get spent? And I'd say that the two determining factors for that are, one, the availability of capital, because that tells developers how to gear up, what to think about in terms of building. You're not going to pursue building something if you don't think that there's money available for it. But then the second key bottleneck is that predictability of risk and time when it comes to the regulatory process and whether or not a project's going to be able to come to fruition. Because at some point, if our pipelines are going to be built out and we're going to have shovel-ready projects, those projects need to have confidence in the processes they're going to need to navigate to get to success. And when it comes time to hit gas, that means that they're spending more money and there's greater risk. And you're not going to be around very long as a non or for profit if you don't hit that timing right. So just generally, and I'm happy to talk more about these items as you wish, as you go through other parts of your bill, but we've been really impressed with the way you've balanced the policy and regulatory fixes alongside meeting unmet and underserved needs. So happy to spend more time on these items if you'd like, but to dive into the missing middle project, I can't start without talking a bit about your proposal to fund first generation homeownership too. And I understand that that's still in the bill, is that right?
It is.
Great.
Nothing has really been removed from the bill yet. So,
Great.
but it's still in the bill. Yeah.
Great. So I hope this isn't the first time you've seen this slide or this graph or seen similar statistics, but I hope it fortifies that proposal to invest in first generation homeownership is a clear need in Vermont. Since 1974, VHFA has provided affordable home purchase mortgages to over 30,000 low to moderate income Vermonters. And since 2015, we've provided over 1,300 homes or home buyers down payment assistance through the state homeownership tax credit program, which you all have been great champions of. And we have a really strong network of partners that includes banks, nonprofits, homeownership centers, and non-traditional partners, and believe that there's a system to help deliver this to the marketplace that we're really excited about. And I was also really moved by the testimony you received from Habitat for Humanity that talked about the importance of what homeownership means to households, right? Health benefits, stable employment opportunity, better family outcomes, safe, decent, affordable housing should be a basic human right. And we live and breathe that at our agency. We also live in a world, whether we like it or not, that homes have become a key vehicle for the long-term financial security through equity and generational wealth and asset transfers. We do not in our country have the level of social safety nets that I think we would all like for middle income households that guarantee everyone will have financial and housing security long-term. And there are really deep and significant impacts from that reality, and it creates greater disparity. So home equity that's accessible to homeowners in the United States just hit an all-time high. You can look that up. The available home equity in the United States right now has reached $9.9 trillion. And that's if you remove 20% of the home's value from all households' availability. So that's what we would call tappable or accessible equity in a home. The census also found that Americans rely on equity to support about 30% of their average household wealth, that comes through a home. And then homeowner households are estimated to have wealth levels at 88.6 times the wealth of non-homeowner households right now. That's a really disturbing disparity, not one we want to promote or continue in terms of a trend. But I want to point that out, that as we look at the opportunity to make first generation investments into households, those disparities are, when you're talking about that level of resource availability to one segment of our population and not available to another segment of our population, is both frustrating and concerning. So applaud your efforts on the first generation home buyer front and think it could have a great impact. So to move on, though, all that said, I want to be clear that this is the marketplace right now that we are sending those households with additional down payment assistance resources out into, right? They're participating in an environment where there's been a historic underproduction of housing in Vermont and the United States at large, and it's greatly impacting prices right now. There are just simply not enough homes for recipients of down payment assistance programs to buy. In the United States, we just crossed for the first time in our history a $400,000 median sales price nationwide. That's pretty astounding, right? That was a big number that made everybody cringe, $400,000. We're not quite there yet in Vermont, but it's getting close. Vermont's experienced one of the sharpest rises of states in the country. I am looking out my window right now and I can see a little 2.5 bedroom home that's just a street over in Winooski. My friend purchased that home in 2016 for $185,000. When she went to put it on the market, her real estate advisor in 2021 advised that she put on the market for $285,000. The final sales price was $234,000. She received 16 offers over asking price. It broke that individual's heart to see families coming in and out of the home and not be able to say, I really want this to go to a particular individual or another, but it's endemic of what people are seeing from a price increase overall. This is the market and what it looks like right now. And we've talked a little bit about prices, and this is what we're seeing on the multifamily side for construction prices. And I can tell you that already this slide is outdated. When we get updated proposals for these same applications that are telling us right now it's going to cost about $348,000 to build a unit of affordable rental housing, that number will actually be higher. We expect it to be higher on the new construction side. So the price pieces are real here. It's more anecdotal. It's harder to nail down where the price increases are on single family homes because of a lot of these projects look relatively similar. They are all unique, all meeting unique community needs, but by and large, there's a relative level of similarity, even in comparison to what we see on the single family side of things. So just to jump in now to the specifics of the actual program, and I think you all have been through this slide a number of times. I just want to reiterate off the top, I think Commissioner Hannaford said it pretty well, that this proposal is absolutely not in opposition to any models that have historically been incredible vehicles for affordable homeownership. And we have funded a lot of shared equity homes with the HFA resources and look forward to doing that well into our future. And we think this is quite complementary to what we're doing in the current deployment of state homeownership tax credits. Our current homeownership investments through the state tax program do require perpetual affordability and often do fund shared equity homes as a vast majority of what they do. In this new proposal, we are asking we're asking that same level of subsidy that's provided to fill that affordability gap stay in the home long term and is recycled to help the next purchaser. It's not quite the same thing, you're right, as what the shared equity model does. But we think it's a really viable model and actually can still work in great concert with the shared equity model. So just walking through, again, just the high points in case you need it. We're saying that the maximum subsidy provided by the program would be 35% and would serve households capped at 120% AMI. We'd fund the value gap of a home, which in this model on the screen before you, let's say the home cost $400,000 to construct and the appraisal or market value of that home was $375,000. We believe the value gap of $25,000 should go to help Vermont builders and developers in bridging the cost of what the difference between what it costs to build a home and what the actual market will bear for that home right now. But then I think that slide I showed where we are going with the prices tells you that the market might not be a great indicator for us to follow right now when it comes to what's affordable to Vermont families. I like to remind folks all the time, we take our work really seriously and we try our best to use policy and our investments to create housing in the best way possible. But we don't build housing, right? And you did have somebody in your committee last week who does build housing. I was pretty struck by that testimony because when Senator Brock asked the last question of the day to that builder, which basically said, "What do you think we can do?" His focus was on two things. Number one, it was on the depleting workforce and his ability to get workers at the wages that they need to build the homes in Vermont that we need. And he hoped that more of the effort and investment opportunities would help the next tier up for what we might classically assign as affordable housing. So this is really focused on that 80 to 120 range, and that's where the affordability subsidy comes in, right? Is it then buys down that home additionally to get us to the point where, in this example, we're serving 100% AMI household. That $55,500 in this proposal would stay to reduce the future sales price. What VHFA has proposed in our policy drafts is to require that a appraisal be generated when the home is when there's a discussion about the home going up for sale, the appraisal price would be generated, and that subsidy amount would be subtracted from that appraisal price for the future sales price, so that it goes to market at reduced by that 55,500. Now, what that does not do, that I just want to call out, shared equity does do, is it does not move with wages in the market in the same way. It just doesn't. That subsidy will stay stagnant. We still think that's a valuable thing, though. We think that's a valuable option. And where appropriate and when it makes sense, and when the developer decides it's the right thing for their model, shared equity can be used with this funding. It's absolutely a companion for that.
I guess I'm not following that. Sure. Everybody keeps saying they can be used in tandem and together. Can they be used in tandem and together in the same home, or one home would go? So you could modify this proposal here. Right now, it seems like you're saying that 20 years from now, if the home sells for $1 million, 55,000 of that would go back to the nonprofit or to the state or whoever who gave them the discount originally, and the rest would be kept. The rest of the profit over those 20 years that brought the house to $1 million would stay with the homeowner. Under shared equity, far less of that increase would stay with the homeowner. But you're saying you can design it any way you want, so part of it could be shared equity and part of it could be the discount, and that's what would be returned to the nonprofit.
Right. The key number that would change in this model is that appraised market value. If that appraised market value goes up over time, let's say, for example, in 5 years, the individual wants to sell the home and we have appraisal that says it's worth $425,000. The math would say then that we would take that $425,000 and subtract out that $55,500 and reduce it down. And so we use the state tax credit program right now in a very, quite frankly, very similar fashion to this. And it requires perpetual affordability for levels of households. And that perpetual affordability in shared equity models is paid for in the future by the generation of appreciation and equity when it occurs. Another nice thing about, we think this option, it'll give us a little flexibility to work with rural nonprofits that might have slightly different market dynamics that they're dealing with in terms of the ability for their homes to generate that kind of equity. But it's not proposing to keep the home at a particular AMI range. I want to acknowledge that and state that, right? It's saying that whatever the market rate says that home is worth, when it sells that second time, it's going to be reduced by that affordability subsidy. So it's going to continue to push things down.
Can I just clarify this, Mr. Chair? So Seth, to take your 425 reappraised value if it went on the market in 5 years, you would subtract the 55,000. That brings us to like 370.
Yeah.
That it would go on the market at 370?
Yeah, we're working with appraisers and real estate agents to understand the exact best way to do that, because we don't want to have a reduction in the actual valuation of homes in an area based off of a suppressed sales price. So there will be an effective sales price of just that. Yes, Senator Clarkson. That's correct. That's what's being.
And they would have bought the house for 319.
That's correct, right?
So I mean, just stay with me for a sec.
Yeah,
so
sure.
The individual homeowner would benefit the difference between 370 and 319. They would be able to keep that. And the house would go on the market roughly for 370, and that would be with the subsidy, the stagnant subsidy baked into the price, lowering the price for a future homeowner, even though it was appraised at 425.
Right. And this is more aggressive than the federal program proposal. The federal program proposal actually reduces the subsidy retention each year that goes by. I want to call that out. That's what's proposed in the federal program. But yeah, the equity there would be, we would call that sweat equity in terms of the value, right? Because if you started with a value of 375 and we put 55,500 into it, you're not getting any free equity in this model, right? It's all market appreciation and sweat equity that the buyer ends up getting back.
Right, but they'd then pocket 50, that would be an asset for the family if they sold it at $50,500 roughly.
Right. Well, so if
I think we need some examples
Yeah.
with various numbers, but for the purposes of today, I mean, you'll have to put something on paper similar to this chart and do the same thing with
Oh,
how it would look with the shared equity model versus the discount model. And
oh, look, the next,
I'd like to see, I'd like to use less nuanced numbers. Let's use the figure of $1 million in 20 years. This house is valued at the same house. Okay. I understand that the sales price, if it's $1 million 20 years from now, $55,000 of that will go to who at that point?
it would be subtracted off of the sales price of the new home, it would go to the next buyer.
The next buyer would be able to buy the house for $55,000.
5,000 less.
Less than what the appraised market value is. That's correct.
Is that the end of the story? What about 10 years after when that person sells the house? Do they have to, is that gone? That 55,000?
I'm going to acknowledge that Commissioner Hanford's got his hand raised, and is that okay?
Sure.
And the next slide is six home real world example. So maybe
Yes. That's okay.
No,
Yeah,
I guess I would like to know the third buyer down the road, are they going to see any discount from market rate sales?
Yes, I mean that subsidy stays and reduces the cost of the home forever. So in that way, it is a shared equity light. I think I just want to make 2 points. The shared equity model and what folks need around the state. If you talk to Rural Edge or Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust, they have some different needs, and they are looking for a model that works like this in their market. And I just want to also comment that make sure folks understand that, the shared equity model that we have now relies on that very limited state housing tax credit. What we're saying, why this works with the shared equity model, it actually supports it in increasing it. This is a new source of funding for those very housing projects, so that we can, in the last 15 years, we've only been able to fund, I'm going to ballpark here, but it's something around 200 shared equity homes because there's not enough resource. So this resource will subsidize what we already have so we can do more shared equity homes. So it's not a either or, it's a both is what we're saying, because this is a new source for shared equity model to rely on to help fill the gaps in the limited resources that we already have a cap on. And then the other piece, just in very simple terms, the subsidy that we're providing here, always the small subsidy, $50,000, $60,000, stays with the home for every buyer down the line. So that they benefit from that modest investment that keeps the home more affordable. It doesn't have the same impact as a full shared equity home that has $200,000 often of equity in it, that then caps that value in a much more dramatic way over time, but it doesn't lose that subsidy. That subsidy is always benefiting the next homeowner, but we're getting a bigger scale, more homes built by having a shallower subsidy and less sort of ongoing ownership of, if you will, 75% of the home in perpetuity. This turns that more over to the market, but still subtracts that initial subsidy over time for each excessive buyer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, isn't it correct, though, that the value of the subsidy effectively declines over time based on inflation?
Absolutely.
That's correct.
Absolutely.
So that 20 years from now, that $55,000 subsidy, I mean, I could go back with an inflation calculator and look, say 20 years ago, what it would be today. And I would suspect it would be half that, if what?
Yeah,
Not what,
exactly.
There's Absolutely correct. I think the challenge is, the model we have now, the subsidy is so large that we can do so few homes. And
Yeah.
then also, there is an equity piece here about wealth transfer, that this is shifting some of that model to the wealth being transferred to the homeowner and the family that is now first-time home buyer rather than the home in perpetuity. And I think from a public policy, that is a good thing. We should have that option as well to get people in home ownership. And, in 20 years from now, hopefully we have found a way for more market rate, modest homes to be built, and that the needs maybe aren't as dramatic as now, but this is the model that we've found best, that best equips us to address the crisis we have today. Be happy if someone has a different model that thinks that could work in the same fashion. But this is what we've relied on, what we've talked to other states, other folks that they're working on similar things.
So let me go back to Seth for a second. I guess I continue to be confused by, are you saying that if you insist upon a deeper subsidy, not a deeper subsidy, a deeper clawback, I guess, or protection of a lower value, lower price on the home, you're saying that you won't have enough people coming forward because they're not going to make enough profits in 20 years that they're going to want to buy this house, even though they're getting this deep subsidy now, because they don't get to keep it in terms of appreciation through shared equity. There's not enough people out there that will come forward and want help from this program. Is that what you're saying?
So I wouldn't categorically say that. No, I think we see the need for a balance. We see a need for there to be both options available, that shared equity works very well in many instances in many communities, right? It's not undermining the value of that opportunity. If you talk to a mortgage broker, there are different preferences and interests in families, though, in participating in various programs based on what their goal of home ownership is. And I guess that discussion before about that $9.9 trillion that Americans have amassed in equity, and I like that is something that a lot of homeowners aspire towards and they'll make decisions based off of that in terms of which mortgages and which homes they're willing to buy. I'll also say that there are builders, this is the reason we put this example in is this is a builder who just wants to get 6 homes built in a Vermont community. This is a real life example. They preferred me not to identify the community, which I'm being respectful of because they're still trying to do business there. That community has well-meaning local zoning requirements that a certain percentage of the new homes constructed be affordable, which we can applaud. And it's using the same numbers that this program is being based off of that show that the maximum purchase price to meet the requirements of the zoning rules are $343,500. But it also shows us that the cost to build a home before taking any profit or any soft costs at all are hitting them at $370,000. We're also saying that just builders, this should be simple enough that Vermont builders should be able to come in and access a program to help with that problem. Like that's, and I think the more, there are some cases where those builders need simple programs where we apply our restrictions via our covenants on it when it comes to the actual closing of the home. But to ask them to manage more complicated subsidy programs can be really challenging and could deter some builders from participating. I think that's a reality.
Okay, I'm still looking for clarification on the question I asked earlier. When you say these things they complement each other or exist side by side, what you're saying is we have certain monies that we give out where homes use the shared equity model and those are successful. If we do this missing middle as proposed, we are using that $5 million or $15 million to have a certain portfolio of houses that just have the discount and don't have the shared equity model. You're not suggesting that in an individual home on Canal Street in Winooski, it's going to have a combination of shared equity and discount. It's going to be either one or the other for that home, but in the whole world of housing, there's both. I just want to be clear that we're not talking about.
I think it's as simple as this is a new source of money for more shared equity homes.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that, Senator, that
This is our veil.
CATs of the world will use this money to help do more shared equity homes, as well as the existing resources that are very oversubscribed and tapped out. And so this program will allow more shared equity homes to come online, and that the challenge of only doing this model and requiring everyone to be a shared equity home would reduce the number of homes we could produce, because shared equity homes in general require $200,000 or more of subsidy per home, and we will not meet the market needs out there. And it requires an oversight of, in perpetuity that will not allow us to do as many homes and across the state, because they're only going to be managed by a few organizations.
Okay, Commissioner, let me try one more time, because so now I'm hearing that of the $15 million, some of those monies will go into a shared equity model, and some of them will go into this discounted model. But you're not saying there's an individual home. If you're selling an individual home, it's going to be a combination of shared equity or discount. It's going to be either or, and then some of the $15 million will continue to use the shared equity model, and some of it will use this discounted model.
That's correct. I mean, I was saying that if we're providing that subsidy, the initial homeowner is not keeping that. That is shared for the next buyer. So it might not meet the definition of what we call shared equity home, but the equity subsidy is shared with the next owner.
So, okay, so now I think I'm understanding it.
This is a real example too, just to say that aloud. Like, this is a shared equity program, and where we would see the program slotting in is down here in the star. Is we needed to come up with $450,000 in affordable housing resources to do that, and we see this program as being a portion of those. If we get them down to 120 AMI levels on a calculation basis with this program, and there are other state resources from VHFA state credit program, from VHCB or others that then come in to create shared equity homes that take them down to 100 or 80 AMI or a different AMI, those resources will be combined down here. It's not either or. Does that help?
I'm not, I'm sorry I'm being so dense here. It doesn't seem like the question is that hard. For the $15 million you want, let's call this proposal the missing middle, called the discount program. The only thing that survives in perpetual affordability is the discount in the first example of $50,000. That's a discount program. Is every single dollar of this new $15 million going to go out in a discount model? Or is on an individual home, are you just suggesting with this $15 million, we are just doing the discount model for that $15 million, and the traditional share equity model, wherever it gets its money, that can continue in other homes. But as far as the new homes that are being constructed, all we're doing in terms of perpetual affordability is passing that discount on that $50,000 on into the future.
I would say that the description you just described leaves out a really way I think this is going to be used. There's going to be two homes built. One is going to be the shared equity model that receives $70,000 from this program, plus another $130,000 from VHCB. And right next to it is going to be another home that's built with just this $70,000 subsidy. And they're both going to use this money to accomplish the same goal. One might be targeted to a family at 80% of very immediate income and is using $250,000 of subsidy, including 70 from this program. The other home is going to be targeted to a family at 120% of AMI and is only going to use $70,000 of subsidy from this program. Either way, the $70,000 subsidy is going to be carried forward to the benefit of the next buyer by reducing the appraised value.
And this has nothing to do with the value gap at all.
And the value gap will be supported by both shared equity homes and this with this program. It is a new source of money to support the development of more shared equity homes. But some homes will just use this lower subsidy only and will only retain the subsidy that was in the home to the benefit of the next buyer.
Okay.
This, what we're calling the stagnant subsidy.
Depreciating subsidy, or however you want to describe it. It'll benefit people, absolutely, but it depreciates over time.
It's sort of like the subsidies we may be giving to electric cars. I mean, once you drive them off the lot, I mean, it only lasts for so long.
I would say it also works in the same factor that as soon as you drive that car off the lot, its value isn't what it was when you first got in it, right? And so should the home, should the market change and a home lose value, I want to say that we have also proposed that the subsidy be reduced and hold the home buyer harmless from their participation in the market. That's another aspect of discussing this.
The likelihood of that is like almost zero unless it's just hammered by another Irene or something.
It
Yeah, I
might
mean,
surprise you in more rural communities. Actually, on new construction, we've run into it a few times, and we've actually had to go back behind and put new subsidies or more subsidies than expected into a home to keep it
Right.
affordable.
that's the shared equity. In some rural parts of the state, there's had to have been additional money put in because the value it didn't appreciate as fast to even cover the subsidy that was in when the home was sold. And we don't want to take money away from affordable family that's selling the home because they have to. And so in some markets, that's not always the case. In downtown Springfield, if there's a market change in that neighborhood, the homes might not appreciate. And when you use the shared equity model, you don't want someone walking away owing money from a home that they've paid mortgage on for 5 years.
Mm-hmm. I
Okay.
want to add that similar, we manage a qualified allocation plan that sets out the ground rules and the policy priorities for how we spend the largest year-over-year pools of federal funding that come in the state to support affordable housing. And I know we've offered some help with language about how we will use things like affordability, location to ensure it's not sprawl oriented, and looking at the longevity of other investments in the homes as a competitive criteria, right? If we are actually at a point where there's an absorption of these funds, where it's just, we can actually do it all with one type of housing that checks all those boxes and does a really great job, let's do that. Like, we're on board. VHFA has been a stalwart supporter and has put in all of our major policies the principles that the state holds true for perpetual affordability, where appropriate, where possible. So I regret that there was a sense that this might be oppositional to that in some way, because I just don't think that's the case. It's very complementary, and we've got a great track record of balancing policy that results in that.
So is there, we're running late on time. I apologize to Jen for that, but we probably just need to finish this conversation up today, Jen, so I apologize. So I understand that there may be potentially some homeowners who wouldn't enter this market, and I think we do want to serve the people up to 120%. And there may be some homeowners that might not want to enter the market if the subsidy that they're getting, a larger portion of that has to be returned to when they resell their house than under the discount model. Is there any from the builder's perspective? Do they care one way or another whether 10 years or 20 years when the house is sold, how much that original homeowner is going to get to retain on that sale? or are they out of the picture totally? How does that affect the builder's perspective if it's a discount model or a traditional shared equity model?
I guess what I would say is we've tried to design this in the way that a traditional builder can disengage from the process and that our covenants take over and ensure that the subsidy stays in the home, agnostic, without the builder needing to participate. What you'll actually hear from builders is they're more concerned about making sure the sale of record is whatever the market or appraised value is and not any kind of suppressed or reduced value. Because if they've got 8 homes in a development that they built and 2 of them are affordable, it doesn't help the sales prices of everybody around you and the equity that they think they're enjoying if there's record of sales of the same home next door being reduced, right? So those are some of the mechanics we're working through with appraisers and realtors. Great conversations with the board of realtors about this topic.
Oh, that makes it.
So I guess I'm going to have some
I don't get that.
offline conversations because I'm not fully appreciating why doing the traditional perpetual affordability program that's worked so well on shared equity, why it would undermine getting these homes built and bought, and people still wouldn't be appreciative of the help they're getting immediately in exchange for giving back some of the appreciation down the road. I just, there's something that's not hooking up for me at this point, why the state wouldn't want to get more of that money back to recycle it later on if there's willing buyers in the 120% range now, and we can do that. And I understand you're saying that subsidy would have to be deeper. We might not be able to build as many houses, but I don't understand why we couldn't change that formula as well. But maybe just my problem. I don't know if other committee members are confused by that. Anyhow, Seth, it's now 12 minutes till 12. Is there more information you want to share with us at this point?
We'd be interested in sharing some thoughts about the proposed manufactured home community investments when the time's appropriate and right, but I want to be really respectful that Jen Aller's been waiting patiently. Right.
That's the rest of your presentation. Although yes. I do, you're adding the Woodstock piece is not in the presentation that you had sent to Scott. So if you could send an updated one to supplant this, that would be great.
I did that on the fly just now. Sorry about that.
That was very good of you to be able to do it that quickly.
Thank you. So let's hear about your position on the manufactured home, and then we'll wind up.
Sure. Well, I think we're just interested in the fact that there's maybe some cross currents here in regards to the proposed investment from the governor and the budget, and Josh can speak to that, about a large increase in the state tax credit program. And I'm happy to, again, share my screen. I'll try to do that very quickly so I don't take up too much time.
Is this the same program as the one that the House put in, added support for at the end on their, I think it was on the corporate tax bill, or no, it was on 101, excuse me. They came back with the mansion tax and increased funding for support for manufactured homes. Is this the same program you're talking about?
Yes, if I could just real quickly jump in here. So last year, the governor supported an increase to the manufactured housing tax credit program. Same group of state housing tax credits that funds the shared equity program. It's used to support manufactured housing replacement, home ownership building through the equity, and rental tax credits that add on to the federal ones. And so the governor supported a major increase to that last year. It got stuck, didn't pass. We supported it again this year, but it's more of placeholder language, because since the budget was dropped, we have been meeting as a whole housing continuum, and have really developed a program that is much more comprehensive to maximize that tax credit increase. And we think that what is in the S226 it really mirrors what we were talking about, but that we feel that we should add the tax credit increase into your omnibus housing bill of a $250,000 increase to our existing 200,000 as it stands. And then we have sort of laid out how to operationalize the goals that's in your language around improving these manufactured home communities. We have a great opportunity right now with ARPA money, and that's what we're suggesting, to remove abandoned homes that are bringing down the community of these parks, and affecting other neighbors. There are over 50 vacant and abandoned homes. There's over 340 vacant lots, which is impacting rents, lot rent collection by the park owners of all stripes. And we are proposing a more comprehensive sort of program to remove those vacant homes, clean up those lots, make them ready for new development. Get a match up foundation, because now HUD requires HUD approved foundations every time you're putting a new manufactured home in. Match that up with this tax credit so we can cover the foundation with the ARPA grant and use the tax credit just for the down payment of the new energy efficient home to maximize that, as well as some small repair loans. And so it's really complementary to the language you already have in the bill. It's really showing you how we would meet those goals, putting some numbers, how we would break out the money, and then suggesting to complete the comprehensive package here, that we should add the tax credit increase into the omnibus housing bill as well, to make sure it's viewed as a package and has a better chance of making it to the finish line.
So let me ask you a question. Could you put that in writing, first of all, so like a memo on this thing from your perspective? But while we're here now, I understand the tax credit being requested to be increased from 200,000 to 450,000, right? And then that has a multiplier effect for 5 years, correct?
Correct. And, just to be clear, the language that's in the economic development omnibus bill has a higher tax credit increase, but the net result is the same. That increase was a lot higher because we wanted to increase the number of housing of replacement homes by X value. But we feel that this new model has more transformational change and greater impacts, with less ongoing revenue reduction to the state in the years out. We're able to fix these lots, cover it with ARPA grants, and have a smaller increase in the tax credit expansion, which is more likely to gain support in the other committees. And so we feel that we've got a better plan now.
So is this 3 million and 1 million? Is that it? That's ARPA funds in the governor's FY23 budget?
There is lots of housing dollars in the governor's FY23 budget to support mobile homes, rental housing, and so it's in that context.
It's out of those funds, but is it specified anywhere in the budget bill that you would use the 3 million and the 1 million for this purpose, or is it just all part of the mega funding for VHCB or whatever?
It's not specified. The breakdown that you're seeing on the screen here is sort of the general way we would. I think your bill has 5 million in it to support manufactured home communities, and so it's a very similar use of those funds. And this doesn't quite capture all of it, what's on the screen here, but we do have a one-page write-up of how we would operationalize that $5 million investment that you have in your bill.
Okay. That's good. I just want to say, we're getting closer to, this is to everybody, we're getting closer and closer to, the time we have to vote on a bill like this, but people tend to refer to this draft as something like, when they keep saying it's our bill or your bill or stuff like that, this is still in its form, the kitchen sink of all ideas that we're just going through. We haven't really made any decisions on any sections for certain yet. So just want to put that cautionary word out. Okay. So it's a long drawn out thing, and I'm not sure how much progress we made, but it was necessary to have this conversation. And I think hopefully the next time we gather, which will be certainly by early next week, we'll have a little more clarity on the missing middle anyhow. And Jen, I apologize if you're still there, that we didn't get to you today, but we still want to hear from VHCB on their overall thoughts on what's on paper thus far. So any other questions from the committee?
Well, I guess I just wanted to, there was one more slide Seth had. I just didn't know if you wanted to comment on it before we departed.
Well, so Maura Collins today gave some testimony. We'll send the 2-page or 3-pager, I think, over on that on priority housing income level recommendations. If she hasn't sent that already, we'll send that along. But that's just a summary of what her proposal was in Senate Natural this morning.
Okay.
The language about at least 20% of the housing units meet the requirements.
Yes, and we've got a memo that lays it out that's actually already on their site in terms of supporting documents that we can be sure that you all receive if you haven't already. Because that's another one that takes a little while to walk through in terms of its history and what the thinking is behind that recommendation.
Okay. I appreciate everybody for being here. Stay tuned. Probably have you back, like I say, by early next week. So it's now 2 minutes before 12. So I want to thank everybody. Again, I know this is taking up a lot of your time, but we're serious in making a big impact on